This is a £1 coin. What's it really worth? That might sound like a crazy thing to say, but there's a lot more to a coin than meets the eye. Every coin is worth both its face value, in this case £1, but also the value of the materials from which it's made. In this case, a bit of nickel and brass, so not very much. I've come to the Royal Mint to learn about the difference between these two values and why it's very important that the coin has exactly the right weight of precious metal in it. I'll be looking at the times when the monarch got it right and when they got it very wrong, with catastrophic consequences. To ensure that the newly minted coins meet the required standards and are of the correct value, they're put through an annual judicial ceremony called the Trial of the Pyx. The Trial of the Pyx dates back to the 12th century and it's held every February. There's a jury of over 6 assayers from the Company of Goldsmiths, independent from the Royal Mint. After the coins have been inspected and judged, the verdict is read aloud by the clerk of the Goldsmiths Company, at the instruction of the senior master and King's Remembrancer, an ancient post created in 1154 by Henry II. Incredibly, this is the oldest judicial position in England still in existence. This verdict is received by the Chancellor of the Exchequer in their capacity as Master of the Mint. If the coinage is found to be substandard, the trial carries a punishment for the Master of the Mint of a fine, removal from office, or even imprisonment. I'm asking Chris Barker, curator at the Royal Mint, about a famous incident when England's coinage failed the Trial of the Pyx.
It has failed the Trial of the Pyx under the guardianship of that man you see next to you, and that is Sir Isaac Newton, one of our most famous masters of the Royal Mint. So in 1710, he failed the Trial of the Pyx.
Really?
Quite something, yeah.
Under Newton, of all people.
So the Pyx verdict came back that his gold coins were under fineness. They weren't the correct fineness, which something Newton was obviously incensed about. You thought this was ridiculous.
The greatest mathematician, scientist in British history got it badly wrong.
Well, he didn't. This is what he was going to prove. So he was convinced his coins were good. And what he proved was that this Pyx plate that we see here, which was made in 1707 and which they were using, was the wrong fineness. This was made too fine, so to too high a purity.
Oh my goodness. So he went up against the ref and he won?
And he won, yeah. They proved that this was the wrong fineness as a result of his mathematical calculations.
And so he kept it because he was so proud of his calculations.
So they only used it once, and you can see that this had this little corner chopped off in that 1710 Trial of the Pyx, and that's when it was found to be incorrect. And then what happened afterwards, they reverted back to the old trial plate from 1688, the previous one, and this is what's left of that trial plate, because it was used so much that they kept cutting and cutting and cutting away at it for various tests over the years. And all you're left with now is this tiny, tiny number.
He must have been hopping mad.
Livid, absolutely livid about the whole thing. He was really, really angry because one of the things about Newton is he was very keen on the integrity and the accuracy of the coinage. So it's hardly surprising.
Quite rightly, as you'd expect from him. Because was he in personal danger of prosecution or fining? Because this is a big deal.
His reputation was on the line, great scientific reputation, but his reputation as an individual, he could have been fined. There is theoretical imprisonment charges, but probably not by that point in time. More likely he would have been fined.
Yeah. And are these the coins that he produced?
So this would have been the type of coin which would have failed the Pyx. So what we have here is a guinea of Queen Anne, and these are the things that would have been found to be below standard.
That's a great coin, isn't it?
Yeah, fantastic piece.
As Isaac Newton learned, the Trial of the Pyx is very important to ensure that coins contained the correct amount of precious metal. But I want to find out what happens to the economy if they don't. A great example of this comes in the middle of the 16th century, during the reign of the infamous King Henry VIII.
So Chris, what kind of problems does it cause when you mess with the purity of the coins?
It can cause huge economic problems, and you get a great example of that with the Great Debasement. And this is where Henry VIII officially waters down the coinage. It's a bit like when you're watering down the beer. So you're trying to give the public a lower purity gold and silver coinage. A huge problem when these coins rely on their intrinsic weight in precious metal to give them their value.
Yeah, because this doesn't just represent value, it is
the value in itself. So what here is a situation whereby the mint is producing these things at a lot lower purity by the orders of the king so that he can raise more money. So theoretically, his supplies of gold and silver can go further, and in the 1540s he can pay for these massive debts he's run up. He's got this hugely ruinous war going on in France, and he needs to spread his costs more.
Best known for having 6 wives, Henry VIII did everything in excess. He lived a very lavish lifestyle, held enormous banquets, and spent vast amounts of money on wars in both Scotland and France.
Problem is, it brings into question the integrity of the English coinage, and therefore merchants, particularly overseas and in the UK, in England, stop trusting this coin, stop accepting it.
I wouldn't accept it.
Exactly, yeah.
So maybe a very slight short-term gain, but long-term chaos.
Short-term gain, you're right, very short-term gain. And the problem with it, it's an ever-decreasing spiral. You've got to keep debasing it even more to get more rewards. And that just leads to it getting worse and worse and worse. And so you end up with a very, very poor situation by the end of Henry VIII's reign.
And so these ones have been debased, have they?
So what you'll see here quite clearly is the start of his reign. So down here, this very fine gold angel we've got, pretty much pure gold. You can see how yellow that is.
Yeah.
And then a heavily debased gold
I was going to
coin
say, looks
towards the end of his reign.
Doesn't look good, that.
Much more copper's gone into it, so it's much redder. You can't hide this from the public.
If I was a foreign merchant or a creditor, I just wouldn't accept that coin.
You wouldn't want them. You know it's a lower purity.
There might be some short-term gain, but in long term, you're doing enormous damage.
You're shooting yourself in the foot. It's very much a short-term solution to fix a credit problem that he's got going on at that moment in time.
This is another example of Henry VIII just making short-term decisions that are ruinous.
Completely, and it also leads to him picking up a rather unfortunate nickname, and that comes from the silver coinage. So what we have down here is a whole series of testoons, which is like an early shilling. So you can see quite clearly you've got this rather characterful, being kind
looks
portrait
exactly like
of Henry
VIII, yeah.
And these coins were debased. So when you debase them, you put in a lot of copper into them, it reduces their fineness, but you get a very rough red-looking coin. Public doesn't want to accept them, so the mint plates them in a fine layer of silver to make them nice and shiny. Problem with that is that layer wears off, and then you get wear first at the point of highest relief. Now that on this portrait is the nose area. So the silver plate wears off, and the red colour of the copper comes through, and lo and behold, you end up with this red-nosed Henry VIII. And he picks up the nickname of Old Copper-Nose.
Old Copper-Nose.
And that is where
That's
it comes from.
Great. He deserves all the worse. But that's chaos.
Utter chaos, complete chaos. It really brings into question the integrity of the English economic system. And it's not for many, many years before it's restored, because this is Henry's actions, and they have to wait till his daughter's actions to restore it.
Oh, Elizabeth, fixing all her father's problems.
After Henry VIII's death in 1547, there was a period where the royal succession was a little more uncertain. First came Edward VI, but as he was still a child, the realm was governed by a regency council. Edward VI was briefly followed by the 9-day queen, Lady Jane Grey, then Henry's daughter Mary I, subsequently called Bloody Mary. In 1558, another one of Henry's daughters, Elizabeth I, inherited the throne. Along with it, she also inherited a struggling economy with debased coinage.
And it is Elizabeth who in the 1560s fixes this. Bear in mind the problem starts in the 1540s. Wow. So you're seeing this longevity of trying to fix the problem. And she brings in all the debased, ugly coinage and recoins it into this fine gold and high quality silver coinage.
Yeah, these look pucker, don't they?
And you see from the sovereign that we've got here, this beautiful sovereign of Elizabeth I's reign. Fantastic piece. You see yet again the power and the majesty coming across in that.
She looks like Britannia there, doesn't she?
Seated on the throne, grand and ornate.
What a gorgeous coin.
But she's the one who restores the purity and brings back the integrity to the English coinage. It's one of her great successes. And she comes to the mint and visits the mint as a result of this great recoinage in her reign. And she even strikes some sovereigns. So you've got a monarch going to the mint and actually striking these coins.
That's very cool. So she brings to an end, I imagine, a period of economic turmoil.
Yeah, she does. And you think about that huge expansion in trade in Elizabeth's era, it needs a good foundation. So it's very, very important.
Got to get the coins right.
The Great Debasement tarnished the reputation of England's coinage so much that even after Elizabeth I restored it, individual merchants would carry out quality control checks to ensure and to prove that the coins they were trading with were of the correct value.
So merchants, creditors, they don't accept these coins. How do you know when a coin's been debased?
Well, a merchant always wanted to be checking anyway. So you've got a whole series of things that a merchant could do, but particularly in the light of debasement. And you also have things like this, which are some great scales.
Wow, they're so delicate,
They're
aren't they?
great, aren't they?
And so you put a coin on one side,
Yep.
and then the right amount of, because you know a sovereign's supposed to weigh a certain
X amount of money, X amount of weight, yes, and then you do that and then they would balance. So you would end up with merchants and people taking coins as part of trade, using this quite regularly.
So it just goes to show, once you ruin your reputation as a nation, no one's trusting you. They're measuring every single coin you produce.
It's always important to be very, very careful about what you're accepting when you're in trade. And it's not just scales that you would get. Some of the earliest books in the museum's collection are merchants' books from the 16th century. And this is a guide to the currency you could potentially take.
No way.
So if you're
all
going,
different currencies,
all different currencies,
nations.
different nations of Europe. So if you're going around there, you need to know what you're dealing with. You might not have come across this coin before, but you'd open this book as your little guide, and you'd figure out where it is, what it's, where it's from, what its weight is.
That's crazy.
Beautiful things, some conversion tables at the back, but the wonderful illustrations as well with some contemporary weights in there put in by the hand of a merchant from that period in time.
That is an amazing thing. And there's coins being produced all over Europe. I mean, Germany alone, there's so many different coins, so you've got to have a book.
Germany, France, they all produce this plethora of coinage, which no one off the top of their head could ever possibly know. So that is why you get these really beautiful handy guides produced in the 16th century.
So you can't beat the merchants.
You can't, no, the merchants will always know.
Yeah, they will always know. That's great. And presumably, some coin issuing authorities become particularly trusted, like the famous pieces of 8, the Spanish coins. So, and people want to get their hands on those.
There are certain things which do become internationally accepted. You're right with the pieces of 8, that goes all over the world, basically. And the thing with Elizabeth's restoration of the coinage is it helps to restore that quality to the English coinage and that faith. Very, very important for international trade. And that sort of kicks on into later centuries when Britain has this ginormous empire where the coinage goes all over the globe.
And you can trust.
And you can trust and rely upon it.
We've heard a lot about when there isn't enough precious metal in a coin. Now I want to find out about a time when there was too much.
So, what we have here is a tray of Edward III gold coins.
They're beautiful, aren't they?
Incredible pieces, absolutely stunning. But this is the point where you actually have a problem the opposite way. Not too little gold, but too much.
Too much?
Too much. It's the other way around.
Wow.
So Edward III introduces gold coinage to try and catch up with his continental cousins.
So this is the first gold coinage in England's history?
First regular gold coinage, yeah.
Wow.
Okay, he's the man responsible.
Keeping up with the neighbours.
Yeah, and that requires a bit of trial and error. So the first time he does it, he puts too much gold into these coins in relation to their value. So it actually makes more sense to melt these coins we see here, this leopard up here, down or trade them as bullion than it does to exchange them for their face value.
Okay,
because they're worth more on the open market. And that means they become very, very rare. There are next to none of these leopard coins that we see here in existence because they're all disappeared, melted down, or sent back to the mint to have another go at it.
So the mint were having a shocker. Everyone was just melting down the coins. And
it's not what you want when it comes to the economy of a nation. You don't want the gold you've just turned into coins to be suddenly disappearing overseas to foreign merchants to melt down. But that was the situation they found themselves in.
So that's the opposite of today, when there's almost no precious metals in our coins.
Completely, the complete opposite, in fact, the complete opposite.
Don't melt down your pennies today, folks.
Definitely don't melt them down.
Coins are a symbol of value. They're a way of stockpiling your wealth or trading it. But what I've learned here today is it's the process of making that money, of getting it just right. Well, that's the most valuable thing of all. Without a mint that you can trust, the entire economic life of the kingdom could collapse.